Very good evening, everyone coming in. We will get started at about 1 after. Give everyone a moment to get in here. Hello, world. Hello, Robert Taylor. Welcome. The question, Mr. Taylor, is this hello world in Python? Is it in Ruby? Is it in some other language? Where are you? What computer language is hello world talking to us from? All right. Where's everyone joining us from tonight? Do you mind just opening up the chat there? If you look down at the bottom, you'll see chat next to participants and share screen, or not share screen. You won't have that, but we'd love to know where you're calling in from. Salt Lake, New York, Seattle, Florida, upstate New York, not New York City, of course. Absolutely. Philly, San Diego. Denton, Texas. Where is Denton? Do you know where Denton is, Huli?
I'm going to say it's north of Austin and to the west. I don't know if I'm right, though. Am I right about Denton? Yep. North of
Fort Worth. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Lebanon, Tennessee. Yeah, I know Lebanon. I used to live in, I took 2 years of college classes at Middle Tennessee State University. So I lived in Murfreesboro and Franklin for a while. So Lebanon's over there. Asheville, North Carolina. Excellent. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got a couple of things to walk us through before we get into our subject at hand. First of all, introductions. My name is Joshua Robinson. I'm the director of the product design program here at Flatiron School and have been for about 1.5 years now. I work with the curriculum and the instructors and marketing and all the different departments that help put on this entire program, and community and student services, student success, and lots of different people go into making this program what it is. So I kind of oversee and work with all the different people. So we have joining us tonight someone that I am incredibly excited to have, particularly on this episode that we're doing about information and learning design. So I'm gonna kick it over to you, Huli Houlihan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and what you do here at Flatiron.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. We're thrilled that you're taking some time out of your schedule to invest in yourself tonight and be curious about the world around you. We're looking forward to talking about learning and psychology and all kinds of fascinating stuff. I am an instructor with Flatiron. My background is as a UX designer and a product designer, and moving into product management. And I have the great good fortune at this point of working with the team at the U.S. Army Software Factory, helping design the next generation of software for our soldiers.
Excellent. Thank you, Huli. Lily Cutler, thank you so much for that call out. We're actually not working in slides tonight. For these episodes, we tend to be a little more laid back and don't do a big kind of presentation. What we do is we work in a program called Figma, where you can see I can zoom way out here and I've got all of this information to talk about tonight. Some really, really interesting things I want to get into. So it's not going to be quite as formal as walking through a bunch of slides. But thanks for the call out. That's really great. Everyone's kind of looking out for each other in these sessions, so that's fun. All right. So as a heads up here, we do have the closed captioning available for anyone that would like to use it. So if you look down at the bottom, you'll see CC live transcript. You can turn that on and off. So if the words popping up at the bottom of the screen bother you or you don't want them, then you can turn those off. You can use the Q&A function if you want to ask any question at any time during this episode. Again, this is a big family here. We're all just here to talk about some interesting things related to design. So it's not a presentation, it's not a lecture. At any point, please use the chat or the Q&A function here to ask a question or make a comment or a suggestion. We'll be watching out for that. We love to get interactive with this and hear your thoughts and ideas and your reactions to some of the things that we're talking about. So it's more of a conversation. We will be sharing that recording for this session out within 3 days. So you'll get a follow-up email in 3 days, and it will have a link to not only the recording, we're also going to share out this Figma file. So you can get access to all of this delicious information and ideas that's going on down here. If you are interested in the product design program or Flatiron School more in general, there's an information session that is immediately following this that is led by another Flatiron instructor. So if you visit the URL that is down here, you will be able to sign up for that information session and get the Zoom link to it. And I just wanted to put a quick plug in for our next episode, which will be happening in a month. And we're going to be talking about tabletop game design or board game design. Okay, we're going to be talking about how rolling the dice, playing the cards, Euro style games, Ameritrash style games. We're not talking about Monopoly here. Okay, we're talking about things like Settlers of Catan and Dominion, and maybe getting into some storytelling. If any of you are into board games, how in the world is that like UX and UI? How are these games designed? What are the different elements that people think about? And why thinking about some of these game mechanics could actually be really interesting to product designers, because there's a lot of overlap and similarity between board game design, things like onboarding and service design, and teaching the rules and constraints of systems design. So yeah, I think it could be really interesting to product designers or people that work in technology. So that'll be coming up next month. Awesome. I saw someone said the cones of Dunshire. Exactly.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, that was you. Okay. Exactly. I think we'll just do the episode on that. Okay. Well, let's see. Huli, your audio is a little bit muddy. Okay. We'll let you work on that.
Yes. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to dive right in here talking about information, too much information. So there's an idea out here that it's sort of a metaphor that we think about the human mind, the brain, as a vessel, something that we can pour information into and then pour information out of when we're ready to recall things. We could make the vessel bigger. We could make it so that the opening of the vessel is wider, which allows more information in. We could make the vessel, we could put a sieve or a filter on top of the vessel so that maybe we're filtering out some information, right? Give me just 1 second, everyone. Hold on. But here's the problem with that metaphor. The mind doesn't just store things. It's not just a receptacle for information, right? It also takes action. Vessels do not take action. And that's where learning happens, right? Any of you heard of the learning feedback loop, right? When I say take action, I mean things like apply, implement, experiment, conversate, immersion, experience, collaboration, and most important of all, making mistakes. Okay, that's where learning happens. So many products, I think, and many experiences are designed not on purpose necessarily, but they're designed with that metaphor of like, as long as we can pour as much in and make a bigger capacity, or we can like optimize for storage, then like we're doing our job with information. But you're ignoring where learning actually happens. So what we get is something I'm calling the art of missing the idea. Okay. Just like here, you might read 30 books, but if you're not able to make the connections across the ideas, you're not actually learning. You're not getting the relationships between the ideas, between the pages. And that's what learning is. It's relationships. And so the bigger picture has to emerge.
And I'd like to jump in here and say that's
Yeah.
one of the things I love about working with adult learners is that, you know, when you're younger, certainly your brain is capable of learning as much as when you're older, but there are different styles of learning. And when you're younger, you're absorbing a lot of information, you're learning things for the first time. When you get older, you've got context. And so there's something really rich and satisfying about work. Not that it's not great to teach in an elementary school, but working with adults and seeing them be able to make the connection between the job they had in a food truck or the job that they had teaching second graders or something that happened to them in college that really stuck with them, and make that connection with what's being presented to them in real time. That's where explosive and exponential learning happens. And I love that about working with adults.
I'm actually really interested now. All our participants that we have, if you don't mind going over to the webinar chat and let me know what your current, I won't say occupation, but what's your current deal, right? That might be your occupation, but it might also be a stay-at-home mom. It might be a caregiver. It might be all kind of things, okay? So whatever your deal is, I'd just like to know what it is right now.
Oh, this is just fascinating. Medical speech pathologist, a lot of writers, recovering wealth manager. Oh,
Wow.
nice. Yeah, all different relationships to learning as well. We've got teachers, we've got learning design coordinators. We have lifelong learners, obviously, throughout this set of folks. Photography, that is a great background for this kind of work. Just that visual vocabulary and that visual context, having developed your eye, and that way it makes you a really valuable member of a UX team. Caregiver, designer, engineer, and artist. Sam C is doing it all. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, Mark,
Yeah, a lot of great stuff.
consultant business transformation. Anytime you're doing consulting, that requires such a range of skills, communication, persuasion, facilitation. I always find that like there's such an overlap between product design and then the skills that people are already using in other careers. So even if you're not looking to be a career changer into product design or software engineering or something like that, that's what I love about, we get such a varied background of people in these different episodes, because we're talking about sort of foundational principles that transcend any one, occupation, even though we largely focus more on design. Data
I see
analytics.
Cameron's in architecture, and I can't remember from looking at the presentation if we're going to have a chance to just refer to information architecture, but Cameron, there's a way out for you. You do not have to stay in architecture. We've got a side quest for you.
We're going to pull you over to
yes,
over
we'll
to
pull you
product
over
design.
to our side.
There is a lot of overlap there. Okay. So how do we make the complex clear, right? How do we not miss the idea? How do we understand what matters? So there's a product designer. His name is John Kolko, I believe. He founded the Austin Center for Design. So I know
yes, he
from
did.
Denton, but right, he founded Austin. He had this idea of the synthesis and jumping across these different chasms where you are moving from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. Okay, so let me zoom in here so you can really focus in on what this means. So when we say data, what do we mean by data? When I say it, I mean sort of the fundamental, meaning the atomic part of maybe a user interview. Okay, maybe we've done user interviews and we have one little data point that's like, I saw the user do X, or this user told me that they needed a different way to accomplish something. One data point. Okay, it could also be analytics. It could be data that we've gathered from a KPI, or data we've gathered from a survey. It could be any type of information, but it's usually a discrete point of information. On its own, data is not helpful, right? One discrete piece of data does not an insight make. To do that, you've got to jump across and turn it into information. So information is going to be something that pushes insight up to the top. So it might be many different data points, and you use inference or something we call abductive reasoning. You've heard of inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning. So we can use inductive or abductive reasoning to make inferences about what all these different data points means. Okay, well, one customer told me this, but 12 customers told me that. So what does that mean? What's the information there? The next one, getting to knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is knowing how to apply the information. Knowledge is saying, with the insights that I have, I can now take real action in the world or in the product or in the service to improve the lives of a customer or a user. I know how to apply the information. So that's part of what synthesis is. And then that last big leap where you can see the person is making the gigantic leap across, and it's not certain that they're going to make it looking at this, is because you have wisdom. And it's probably true that not many product teams make it to wisdom. But this is where real, true understanding, deeper understanding and empathy is built around wisdom, where you look around and you really see. And to see means to truly understand. Okay. So one of the methods that we product designers love to use when we're trying to do what we call synthesis, when we're trying to get to information and application of that information, knowledge, we're trying to get knowledge, we use something called affinity diagramming. That is when we take observations or user interview results and we start clustering them together. And we try to find the insight or the key principle that holds everything together. So if you look here, you see 3 different quotes from user interviews. User number 1 said that she likes that Google gives us these local listings first for restaurants. User number 2 says they use the built-in features in their car to find good restaurants in the area. User number 3 says there's an icon feature on the map in the car that he uses to find gas stations. 3 different situations, 3 different contexts, 3 different users. What is the information among those data points? I love getting local results immediately without having to ask. That is what a key principle that we can use. That's useful for design to start taking action and turn into knowledge.
Josh, we have a question off the John Coco chart.
Yeah.
John has a question about, what does shift the placements mean? I think that was one of the bullet points to the right, perhaps. No, I don't see it there. Oh, yes, under experience scaffolding. Yes,
I'm only taking a guess. I think it might mean reframing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
That's my
John's way of
understanding
saying
as well.
reframing.
Mm-hmm.
So reframing is when you try to look at the information from a different perspective. One of my favorite books that I like to read to my kids is called What Do You Do with an Idea? Huli, you'll appreciate this because I know
Yes.
you like to pull from things like this
Mm-hmm.
for your Army cohorts, and I love it so much. But it's called What Do You Do with an Idea? And one of the pages talks about how learning to see things upside down is a real skill and a talent. It is useful. Learning to take the opposite of things and think, what if the opposite is true of what our assumption is, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, about how you reframe and how that plays into information and learning. But yeah, reframing is my interpretation of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Good question. Thank you. So we talked about affinity diagramming in synthesis. What about diagrammatic representations? Remember earlier, I said understanding is about seeing relationships. How do we see relationships? We can hold them in our head, right? And maybe we can recall things for a test, right? Maybe when we understand, let's all think back to the last math class you took. Okay, for some of us, that may have been high school. For some of us, that may have been a calculus in college. For some of us, that may have been something really, really advanced. Yeah. And you're laughing at me right now, and that's fine.
No, I'm laughing because it's been a minute since I've taken a math class. I'm trying to remember.
So do you ever remember making the connection between, like, when your teacher showed it to you on the board with one set of numbers or one set of methods, and then you had to do the practice yourself, and it was like different numbers, different methods, they were bigger numbers, they were small, whatever it was, like it mixed things up. And the only way that you could do that is to take the principles that you learned from the teacher on the whiteboard or chalkboard for some of us, and apply those principles to a new context, right? That is understanding a relationship. So there are times when we can hold that enough in our heads to then apply that. But there are times of complexity, and there are times when we need to explain things to people where diagrammatic representations, engaging our the visual muscles, is going to create more understanding, because with some of these representations that designers create, you get this sense of exploration, right? I can go in, and if any of you are fans of baseball, right, I can go in and look at these diagrams and deconstruct all the relationships and rules. And to me, it's a map. It's an interesting map of the concept of baseball, right? And here's another example of the same thing. And you can do this with any concept, right? So sometimes it's too much to try to hold it in your head to explain to someone or to really understand it or explore it, especially with like a complex domain, right? This is just baseball. I can't imagine, biotech supply chain, Disha, to bring you back into it, right? You need these visual representations, and it's a curiosity, I think, that drives us to create maps like this, concept maps that we can explore.
And there's a question from Katie. She's wondering, is this the way that this is broken down into these granular pieces and then kind of reassembled visually? Is this a good example of product design, breaking it down in this way? And I would say it's certainly one of the kinds of artifacts that you have available to you. Every product is going to have different properties and will lend itself to a different kind of representation. But for something as layered as a professional sport, a game that has all of these rules, I think this visual representation is a pretty powerful tool. Both the fishbone diagram on the other page and this more circular design are both very helpful. But product design can also be much simpler than this. It really depends on the product. But it's a great question.
Yeah. All right, Huli, your time has arrived. So we are going to talk a little bit about information architecture. All right.
All right. This is for Cameron. Cameron, we're going to talk about information architecture for a second. Yeah. And there are lots of different ways that we can organize information for our users whether we're designing an app, a website, a poster, a grocery store, whatever it is we're developing. We have the opportunity first to interview them and find out what their mental models are. How do they organize information? If they're looking for a tomato in the grocery store, we know it's a fruit, but it's probably not going to be in the fruit section of the grocery store because that's not the type of ingredient that people are looking for when they're looking for tomatoes, right? If you're looking for peanut butter, you're not necessarily going to go to the dairy section and find it. So we start by figuring out our users' mental models, and then they're going to give us cues about how they're going to be searching for that information. The example here with these hats is excellent. Maybe you're searching for a hat. Let's say you're searching online and you want to know the newest hats that have just arrived. So you may click on the feature, the sort or the filter that allows you to find the newest things, or it may be in the navigation. It may say new, and you just click there, but you're able to find the thing that arrived most recently because of a cue that the designer has given you. They can also give you the opportunity, maybe you're looking for something that looks like a hat you saw on a TV show, or you are looking for something to wear to the Kentucky Derby. You're looking for a very particular kind of hat. And so you can sort by category. That's a tool that's available to you as a designer. Other people are saying, it matters to me that it was sustainably made, or it matters to me that it's a particular style, or I'm on a budget, or this is a gift and budget is no object. And you can sort from high to low or low to high. All of this is something that you can design as an information architect or as a UX designer or a product designer, just with an interest in this kind of work. The example that comes to mind for me was during COVID. You know, we all kind of moved to sweats and yoga pants and pajamas. And I had a friend who was talking about buying some new jeans when they had to go back to work, and said they forgot what they were called, and they were calling them hard pants because they were so used to wearing soft pants for a long time. No. They had to go looking for soft pants. And of course, that is not a common term in US retail practice. So they had to work on it for a minute. But that's an idea of how your ability as an individual to hold lots of complex ideas into your head and sort them into categories and identify patterns can really serve you well in this community. There's a great question from Katie. Josh, if you want to take this one. We've thrown out a lot of titles so far tonight: UX designer, product designer, information architect, product researcher, UX researcher. Are they all the same thing? And
yes. No. No. They can be the same thing depending on the company. Okay, it's one of those things that is unfortunately a bit of a barrier to entry for people into design, because they see all these titles and they think, well, it must mean these totally separate things. And the answer is sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I will tell you the academic answer, okay? Meaning don't take this and apply it to a job search. You can start with this idea and use it to like narrow down, but don't take it as like rule. Okay, so a UX designer or user experience designer is really going to be focusing more on how users think about what their goals are, what users are motivated by. They might be doing research, could be competitive research on business competitors and market analysis, or user research, observing users in their natural environment, right? To try to find out what problems need to be solved and how your product could do it better. UX designers are usually involved in the conceptual or conceptualization of feature ideas, right? So a lot of sketching, a lot of design work in what we call lower fidelity. So gray wireframes, it doesn't look like the final product. It's an approximation of the final product. But UX designers really focus on how to optimize these things for users. The UI designer, user interface designer, is going to focus more on the visual aspects and the interaction aspects. Okay, so could be working on prototyping, higher fidelity, so it might look like the final product. They might be doing user testing on the product before they ship it over to software engineers to create the product. UI designers could be working in style systems and design systems to create branding and logo design. So there's a lot that falls under UI design, but usually they're more focused on how the product is consumed and interacted with. There's also product designer, which sort of encapsulates 4 pillars, I'd say. So that's research, UX design, UI design, and product strategy. Okay, and product strategy is where you're really thinking more about how is this going to differentiate itself amongst all of the different competitors, right? What's our research strategy? How do we know that this is the right thing to build, right? Really focusing on the entirety of the product life cycle, from early exploration and conceptualization to final designs. And product designers can kind of work across all of those different things. It's a great question.
I think the real wild card is the UX maturity of the company. That if you've got a company that is very mature and has assigned significant resources to design, you may have individuals who specialize in some of these things, who exclusively do user interviews, who exclusively work on information architecture and navigation. But chances are, if they're new to the field and they've just read an article in the In-Flight magazine that says, it's time to have design in your company, then you may be in a pickle, because you may be expected to do everything on that continuum by yourself. There are some great books out there about being a UX department of one and how to prioritize your time and make those choices. But that's probably a clue. If someone is looking for a UX/UI designer, they probably aren't a very mature company just yet. So just take that into account when you interview. It could be the perfect place for you to advance and move up, but it may not have a deep mentorship program there for you to learn from. But I think that's a whole other workshop.
It is, yeah. But yeah. I'm glad you asked that question, because I do think it is it's an unnecessary barrier to getting people into the industry, to have confusing terms and 2 things being the same thing. Okay, so the creative organization of information creates new information, right? That's what we kind of talked about with information architecture. Rearranging things or reframing problems can result in new ways to solve problems. You start thinking about problems in a different way. That's where innovation comes from. That's why looking at things upside down sometimes can be a useful skill. Okay. Another principle here that I think is important when we're talking about information is that curiosity sustains motivation. Motivation, in turn, fuels learning. Another way to say this is you only learn what you're interested in. So
that ring a bell with anybody? I'm just thinking back to high school and the classes I was interested in, I did really well. And the classes I wasn't so interested in, it took really just forcing functions and penalties and consequences to get me to do it.
There is a parking deck here in Chicago that I'm sure this isn't just exclusive to Chicago. I'm sure we've all been in parking decks that do this, but has anyone noticed when parking decks use a different system other than numerical for the different levels? I'm interested, put it in the chat if you've ever noticed that. And what I mean by a different system is, could be countries, could be songs, it could be pieces of art, or famous artists. I'm wondering if anyone has ever
colors for sure, or you're on the Mickey Mouse floor, or you're on the Pluto floor, or you're on the Goofy floor. That's where I would be, on the Goofy floor. But yeah, there are lots of people who try, this is a great place to be creative, where people leave their most expensive possession. That's a great time to be creative about of marking and doing wayfinding.
So why do that is my question. Why do you think parking decks do that? Why not just use the good tried and true numbers? Well, I mean, I would say it's probably because it's trying to re-engage your mind, because you're going to remember something like that because it's distinct, it's different, right? The number, so it's about creating that relationship between where I parked and something that is creating a new relationship. And here's what I'm going to show you in a minute. New relationships are recalled much easier than older ones because of recency, right? So if you think Paris, France, my car, that relationship is probably, there's not many neurons in your brain that are like, that have that relationship. So to establish that new relationship creates an interest, right? And your brain is motivated to remember that. So in order to stay motivated and keep learning, and if you're designers or if you're doing any kind of customer facing work, if you want to keep your customers engaged, and if you want to keep them motivated to come back to your product or to use your product or overcome the hurdle of onboarding or whatever it is, design for motivation and design for curiosity. Okay. The way we can do that as customer facing design, I'm just going to say designers, we're all designers in one way or another. Okay. I don't care what your job is. You're creative and you're using creative muscles and skills all the time in your job. You are a designer. Okay. So we're all designers here for this episode. And after the episode, you're still a designer. Experiencing interest, being interested in something, is like a boost, a platform that gets you past a barrier in learning, okay? Where the poor little figure is like running off the cliff there, that's where there was no boost or no platform. There is always going to be a time where our mental capacities and physical capacities, emotional capacities are drained, and we are no longer going to remember information. So interest, something that's novel and something that's different, can be used as a technique of re-engagement. Or said another way, curiosity creates motivation. But here's the wacky thing about humans, at least from what I've learned doing some research on this. The same strategy that helps you or your user in one circumstance is not necessarily going to help you in a different circumstance. So what I mean by that is, just because it's the same goal doesn't mean you're going to have the same reaction at a different time. And I think we see this as educators, where we
Mhm.
might give a student a strategy in phase 2 to help them figure something out or get past the wall of despair that sometimes comes with like, I'm never going to get this, right? We might give them a
Yeah.
strategy. And then 3 weeks later, when they're in the same kind of situation, it's like that strategy doesn't do it. Have you ever experienced that, Huli?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes the key ingredient is a pep talk. Sometimes the key ingredient is here's a new technique that you may not have tried before. And just something about the novelty of it can recharge someone. In our classroom, we do all kinds of weird things to shake people loose when they get stuck. I've got a grab bag full of little squishy toys. We do rock, paper, scissors contests. We play with Legos. We touch grass, as the kids say. We try to get away from the screen and do something with our hands. And quite often that will knock something loose. But I can't use Legos every single time, because
Hmm.
then the novelty is gone. The surprise, the adventure, the curiosity is short circuited.
Yeah. And Huli, this is why I was so happy to have you here for this one, because what you are really doing with these students is you're playing. You're having them play.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
everyone think now, like if you have kids or you know kids, everybody knows a kid, right? Like their play is so varied, right? It's the same idea. We're all just big kids, aren't we? Like at the end of the day. So
Hmm.
you need that play and to vary up the different strategies to sustain that motivation and to keep those platforms coming. And so I'm specifically talking about situations like our product design boot camp, where it's like 15 weeks of very intensive learning and
Hmm.
an application of what you learn. And so you need a lot of different strategies to get through that. Has anyone here taken a online course on like Coursera, edX, and any open AI, whatever the platforms are? Did you finish the course? Or did you abandon the course? There's no judgment. Believe me, I have abandoned many of a Coursera course on something that I was
Hmm.
interested in, right? Do you remember what it felt like to sign up for that course? Remember, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to learn machine learning. My God, that's going to be awesome. I'm going to be a designer who knows what machine learning is. Fast forward 2 weeks later, it's like, is anyone like getting triggered right now? Because I'm kind of triggering myself.
Yeah.
I did not have this. I did not use these strategies for myself, or the strategies that were designed for me by Coursera or edX. They've got design teams and they have strategies. Okay. What are some of the strategies they have? Well, they will email me to say, hey, it's been a week. Get your butt back into the course. Or, hey, here's an article related to. So there are strategies that these design teams are thinking about to try to give you these platforms to help keep you motivated, right? There's two things that we need in order for our users or ourselves to try to sustain learning in order to achieve something, some outcome, right? I want to be a product designer who also knows machine learning, right? That's what the outcome I want. I have to see it as valuable, and I have to believe that it's achievable. If those two things aren't present for me, or not being communicated to me through the product, if I'm not persuaded by the product or sometimes the marketing, right, that it's valuable and that it's also achievable, I'm never going to make it. So you've got to have those two things. And I have found it really valuable to think about our students with that, because just because you start a process believing that it's valuable and that it's achievable doesn't mean it's going to stay that way in your head or in your user's head.
That's a great point, Josh. We actually had a conversation about that today in class. A product team from the development floor came into the classroom and said, hey, you guys are designers, or you're about to graduate and move over to our side of the hall. So can you take a look at this tool that we're trying to build for designers? We're calling it, right now we're calling it a design one-stop shop, and it's going to have our design guide, and it's going to have this, and it's going to have that. And what do you think? And it looked beautiful. They had it built out in FibJam, and it looked really nice. It was very tidy. Everything was at right angles. It was just beautiful. And one of our best designers raised his hand and said, "There's no value to this. It looks great, and I believe I could use it easily, but why would I open it more than once?" And because this is a person who has many other options to achieve the same outcome, he wouldn't need what they were thinking needed to be in that one-stop guide. He and his classmates were saying, well, what about adding this? What about adding this? That's what I find valuable here. And so the designers took a whole bunch of notes, and then I hope they didn't delete the app, but they got a lot of feedback they didn't expect. And that's a big part of being a good designer, is being willing to listen to the users about what motivates them, what gets them over those obstacles, and being willing to meet your user where they are.
I mean, that gets us right back to the point about what product designers do and what UX designers do. The idea of building the right thing and building it right. Just because you've built something right doesn't mean it's actually the right thing. Okay, it can work well, it can be beautiful, it can have all these like amazing things, but if it doesn't actually have the value, nobody cares. We've all seen great design now. Like it's easier than ever to achieve like really pretty looking things. Does it provide value? And that's a lot of what like UX and product designers think about, right? And we research and we talk to users about, and we test these ideas and assumptions. That's why reframing is such an important part of this whole process. When we get all this information and think about like, what if we flip this around? What if we think about this from a different way, right? Well, that unlocks something that someone else hasn't thought of, right? Because again, there's usually another app, there's usually another service, another company that someone else could just as easily go to and get it done, right? So when it comes to interest and motivation, how do we like really apply these ideas to design work, and usually digital design? And at least that's what I have the most experience in. Why do people abandon certain products for alternatives? It could be for a similar reason that people abandon their learning goals. They don't think it's reasonable to attain the goal, right? They don't think the goal is attainable anymore. Maybe the interface has become too overwhelming, too complex, too many features. Maybe it's just no longer a goal that's valuable for them to attain. So they start looking for alternative products. And so I have here examples where like a lot of people have abandoned Microsoft Word for Notion, right? Because what I want to achieve, I love that example of Nest, where they just reframed and they said, I think all our competitors have a different goal. I think if we actually come up with a new goal, we can do something here. I think that's cool. That's innovation, right? So what's kind of the takeaway here that we're looking for when it comes to finally getting through that Coursera course on machine learning? It's important that we keep ourselves and our users interested and motivated. Sometimes that's going to look like improving the user experience gradually, progressive improvements, small gradual optimizations. Sometimes it means a big reframing and a rethinking how we consider our problem and what our actual goal is, or what our user's actual goal is. and coming at it from a new perspective. For me, and for a lot of our students, it means giving them strategies that look like this. Remembering that the same strategy is not going to work for everyone, but also the same strategy is not going to work for every single context for the same person. Just because it worked in phase 2 doesn't mean it's going to work in phase 3. So we need a toolbox to pull from, and we need to do some reflection. We ask our students to kind of reflect on what's working. Why is it not working? What are some alternatives, right? Because you're going to come up against these things, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's information overload, whether it's my kid got sick and now he's home all day from school and I can't sign into Coursera when I would normally would. I had a great learning habit that first week, but then time, right?
Life happened. Yeah.
Life happens. Yeah. So you need a toolbox to pull from, and your users do too. And our products can do these things. We can design for these things. It just requires a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about, reframing what the goals are, using more synthesis, really, really getting in there and doing contextual research with users, observing them in their natural environments, not just using your product. That's the other thing too. A lot of our research is around how do users use our product? Do they like it? Right? Do you like me? Tell me you like me. Like that's kind of the attitude that a lot of designers go with. Like just tell me you like me. Right? I need validation. What if instead we told our users, put down our product and show me how you solve that problem without the product? That's a complete reframing of how most of us approach designing services and products. Go ahead, Huli.
And that's where you see the real gaps in the market, right? You see where the real pain point is. I wanted to come back. There's a question from Dustin, and then there's a Q&A conversation I've been having with Lily offline, and it has to do with strategy versus tactics. And the idea in this example you have up on the screen, the strategy is we want to get this person to be a strong presenter and confident in their presentation skills so that they can be an effective communicator. The journey for every person is going to look completely different. The goal is the same, but we need to, as Joshua says, have a toolkit. And that's true whether we are managing a product or whether we are managing a person. We need to be able to flex and meet people where they are. So I think it's a really interesting parallel that Dustin identified, that managing products and then learning and teaching it's got a lot of very similar principles, because if you design a product in a way, you are teaching people to how to use your product, when to use your product, in what context is the product going to be useful.
Lily brings up a good point, and something that like kind of made me reflect. It's like, what happens to these poor stick figures that they fall off, right? Like ideally we would represent, if we're talking about ideal states, we want them to get back on the path, right? Like that's probably a better, at least a more motivational representation of what we're talking about here. Because you're absolutely right. There are times when these things are not going to be avoided, right? That no matter how much you pull from your toolkit or how proactive you are about these things, they are going to happen. So how can we think about those scenarios when they do happen, right? Because that's what a good designer would do. Thank you, Lily. That's what a good product designer would question. So thank you for being a designer.
And sorry, I just want to throw in one more metaphor, because I'm abundant with them. I'm rich with them. The idea of the students in the classroom, I think of them as popcorn. They're all going to pop at a different time. We're making the ideal environment, we've got the skillet, we've got everything's at the right temperature, but every kernel of popcorn has its own timetable, man. They're gonna pop whenever they pop. And we just have to make sure that we're maintaining the environment where that can happen. And so maybe that speaks a little bit to Lily's question about strategy versus tactics, that the strategy is to get as many popcorn kernels to pop as possible. That's our goal. But maybe that's playing with the temperature a little bit. Maybe we need to use canola oil. Maybe we want to use an air popper. I mean, there are an infinite number of, maybe we put on the sidewalk in Texas in September. There are an infinite number of ways that you can pop this popcorn if you're committed to that goal. And then if we're doing our job as instructors, we're teaching you those tactics.
And some of us just get our popcorn in a bag from Costco, and we don't have to pop it at all.
Ah, and it's room temperature. That's terrible.
Okay, as a preview for after tabletop design, which is next month, I believe in January, we have a continuation of this whole thing that we've been talking about. It is, I think, cleverly titled Too Much Information 2. All right, I'm proud of that name. So you can see a preview of some of the stuff we're kind of going to get into with that. We're going to get into some really interesting things about, like, what are the triggers of fascination? What is the theory of fun? Why is disrupting someone's learning actually a good thing? All right, so that's a little preview of like some interesting topics we're going to extend this whole conversation with. So be sure and sign up for that. That should be going on in January. If you want to dig more into this, I would recommend any of these books. Minding Bodies is really, really a great study on using physical space. I've got a whiteboard here in my office, and it's right next to my desk, because sometimes I need to get off the computer screen and start externalizing information and things that I've learned in a different medium, right? It's a different way of thinking. It's externalizing thinking. So Minding Bodies is really good. Design for How People Learn is, I think, a good introductory text to thinking about some of these principles. If you want to get more academic, Stanislas Dehaene, just butchered that, talks about how our brains actually learn. So we get into some of the neuroscience, some of the psychology of this. And then Annie Murphy-Paul, I absolutely highly recommend this book, The Extended Mind, The Power of Thinking Outside the Brain. If you are a practitioner of any sort in this, these are 3 excellent books. Sketching User Experiences, I would recommend this for anyone, by the way. Like if you like coming up with ideas, Sketching User Experiences is a fantastic introduction. But also for if you've been doing it for a while and want to just like brush up on innovative ways of thinking. Design for How People Think, using brain science to build better products. Also designing for behavior change. Huli, did you know that this author, his wife went to Flatiron School? Stephen Wendell?
I did not know that, but I can tell you that Design for How People Think is one of my favorite books out there. And I had a student currently who is struggling in class and just couldn't find his hook into this. And he picked up a copy of that off our shelf in the classroom and fell in love with cognitive psychology and schemas. And he found his home. He's found his place in UX. Yep. So you never know how that might be revealed.
Yeah, Lily brings up a good point. Sketching User Experience is quite an old book by Bill Buxton, but I would still say has fundamental principles that you can apply to your products and your process today. Lastly, I'll just do a plug for Richard Saul Wurman, who coined the phrase information architecture. He has a book called Understanding Understanding that is full of just interesting case studies on information design, design for learning, and approaching it from an artistic perspective. And it is a big old book. It's like 700 pages and it's like a big square. Interesting stuff, very, very interesting. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. Thank you for your interaction and the community in the chat. I have really enjoyed your thoughts, your feedback, and the time that we spent together tonight. So hope to see you soon. We'll send out the recording and I will send out a version of this whole whiteboard for you all to review. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you.